Dennis Rodman was unpredictable and fierce, but behind the chaos he had players he truly respected. These stars earned his loyalty with skill, heart, and deep understanding of the game. Here's a look at Rodman's 6 favorite basketball players, starting with the one who earned his highest respect. Number 1. Michael Jordan. Dennis Rodman always had a special place in his heart for Michael Jordan, even if their story didn't begin in a friendly way. Back in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Rodman was one of the Detroit Pistons' toughest enforcers, and Jordan was the rising superstar of the Chicago Bulls. Every time Jordan drove to the rim, Rodman hit him hard, knocked him down, and made him fight for every single point. Jordan hated facing him, and Rodman never held back because that was the Pistons' culture. But even during those brutal games, Rodman kept an eye on how Jordan worked, how he trained, and how he handled pressure. He later said he respected that Jordan never chased fame or drama, and that he cared more about putting in the work than anything else. When the Bulls traded for Rodman in 1995, nobody knew how the two would fit together after those old battles. Jordan didn't forget the hits, but he also knew Rodman was exactly what the Bulls needed after losing Horace Grant. Rodman walked into the locker room knowing it was Jordan's team, and he understood right away that Jordan's standards were non-negotiable. Rodman said that Jordan brought something different to the game, something he had never seen before, because Jordan lived for the grind and pushed everyone to keep up with him. Rodman appreciated that more than he ever showed on the court because he felt Jordan gave everything to the sport without letting the spotlight distract him. Jordan surprised a lot of people by how quickly he embraced Rodman. Reporters questioned whether Jordan could handle Rodman's wild lifestyle, the hair colors, the piercings, the outfits, the nights out, and the unpredictable energy. Jordan didn't care at all. He told the media that Rodman's hair or clothes never bothered him, and that the only thing that mattered was how hard Rodman played. Jordan said there was no one else in the league who threw himself at loose balls, fought for rebounds, and did the dirty work with as much commitment. He trusted Rodman completely when the game got intense, and he believed the team could not find another player who brought that level of effort. Rodman later opened up about how Jordan saw him as one of the smartest defensive players he ever played with. Jordan talked about how Rodman understood rotations and timing better than anyone. He said Rodman had no limits on defense and could switch, slide, and read plays like a coach. Even if they never hung out off the court, Jordan always knew Rodman would show up and give everything when the lights were on. Rodman said that meant a lot to him because he felt Jordan understood his value in a way few people ever had. There was talk that Rodman idolized Jordan, and while Rodman laughed at the idea, he did admit he respected Jordan's leadership so much that he rarely questioned anything Jordan said. He knew Jordan didn't talk just to talk. If Jordan told him something, it was because it mattered, and Rodman listened. He didn't need daily conversations or long speeches to feel connected to Jordan. Their bond grew from the work they put in, not from hanging out after games. Over time, the tension from their Pistons-Bulls clashes faded, and what stayed was a deep understanding of how much they needed each other. Rodman believed the Bulls would not have won those 3 championships without his defense and rebounding, and he said it proudly because he knew how much pain he took on every night. Jordan agreed in his own way by defending Rodman whenever reporters questioned him. Number 2. Scottie Pippen. Dennis Rodman always talked about how he never really sat down and had long talks with Scottie Pippen in Chicago. But the funny part is that the lack of talking never stopped them from building something solid. When Rodman joined the Bulls in 1995, he came in with that old Pistons history still hanging in the air, and everyone wondered if he and Scottie could even work together after so many tough battles. Scottie had been hit, pushed, and bullied by those Detroit teams, and Rodman was right in the middle of all of that. But when the trade happened, Scottie didn't hesitate. He said yes to bringing Dennis in because he knew the team needed that fire, that effort, and that insane rebounding only Rodman could bring. Scottie later said something really interesting. Long before they were teammates, he actually watched Rodman in college and felt hope because Rodman came from an NAIA school, just like he did. Scottie always thought, if Dennis made it, maybe I can too. That kind of early connection is wild because they never talked about it, but it helped Scottie see Rodman as someone he respected long before they shared a locker room. When Rodman arrived in Chicago, Scottie already knew what kind of worker Dennis was. He had seen him fight for rebounds, run the floor, defend anybody in front of him, and stay in incredible shape. Rodman looked wild off the court, but Scottie understood he was one of the most serious players in the gym. What made their relationship interesting is that Dennis really didn't talk much to anyone. He even said he never had a real conversation with Scottie or Michael Jordan during the entire 3 years they played together. The only time they talked was on the court, pointing, calling switches, shouting about screens, and somehow that was enough. Rodman never felt he needed words to fit in with them because he knew why he was there. His job was to make the team better by doing the dirty work, and Scottie saw that from day one. Scottie said Rodman had a very high basketball IQ and that he made things easier for everybody because he understood defense in a way most players never could. On the floor, their chemistry felt natural. Scottie knew exactly where Rodman would be on a rebound, and he trusted him to switch onto any player without thinking twice. When the Bulls started that 37-3 run in the 1995-96 season, Scottie praised Dennis for changing the whole energy of the team. Scottie loved how Rodman chased every missed shot like it was life or death. He even joked that Dennis made the offense more fun because you could miss and Dennis would just scoop up the ball and hand it right back like a gift. Over the years after basketball, things changed in a good way. Scottie said in an interview that he still hangs out with Dennis and enjoys his company just like he did back when they were teammates. That says a lot because you could tell their bond wasn't built on talking or spending time together every day. It came from trust and respect built through long games, tough practices, and big moments. Scottie even said Dennis is the kind of guy who walks up, asks about your family, and shows real care. And Rodman always appreciated how Scottie treated him like a teammate from the moment he arrived. No judgment, no grudge about the old Pistons days. People like to talk about how Scottie isn't as close to Michael Jordan now, but with Dennis, he says the friendship is still strong. It's honestly surprising considering their quiet years in Chicago, but that's what made their story interesting. Number 3. Magic Johnson. Dennis Rodman always talked about how his battles with Magic Johnson felt sharp and tense in the early years. Because back then, the Pistons and Lakers treated every matchup like a small war. Rodman was young, hungry, and trying to prove he belonged, and Magic was already the face of the league with that easy smile and the game that made defenders feel helpless. Even with all the fire on the court, Rodman always kept a strange kind of admiration for Magic, because he liked players who carried real weight, and Magic carried more than anyone. Their relationship started with elbows, bumps, and long nights of chasing each other through screens. But it slowly shifted as Rodman realized Magic never disrespected him, even when the games got ugly. Things changed in a huge way when Magic announced he had HIV in 1991, because the whole league froze. Players were scared, confused, and unaware of what the disease even meant, and a lot of them admitted they didn't want to guard him. Rodman never thought twice about it, and he said it in the most blunt way possible, telling reporters he did not care what Magic had, because if Magic came to the rim, he was just still gonna hit him the same way he always did. That comment made people gasp at the time. But Magic later said that Rodman's attitude helped calm fears, because Rodman showed he wasn't treating him like a danger, just a rival he respected. Rodman explained years later that Magic's machoism, as he called it, protected him in ways most people never noticed. He said Magic was so loved and so strong in the public eye that his presence changed the whole conversation about HIV. And Rodman admitted that if he had been the one with the diagnosis, he believed the league would have pushed him out fast. Magic's fame gave him a shield, and Rodman never forgot how the league stood with Magic and made space for him during a moment when most of the world reacted with fear. When Magic returned to play during the 1995 season, Rodman was already with San Antonio, and they crossed paths again in the playoffs. Magic talked about Rodman with total respect, saying it took a huge amount of energy to box him out, and calling him the best conditioned player in the entire league. Rodman loved that comment because he always wanted people to see the work behind his chaos, and Magic saw it better than most. Their bond grew over the years, and it even reached the next generation when Magic congratulated Rodman's daughter, Trinity, after her game-winning goal, showing that their respect never faded no matter how different their lives became. Rodman always said their tougher moments on the court made the later respect feel stronger, and he liked telling friends that Magic was one of the few stars who understood him without needing long talks or explanations, which made their connection feel surprisingly natural. Number 4. Isiah Thomas. Dennis Rodman has always considered Isiah Thomas as one of his favorite players, and their story began the moment Rodman arrived in Detroit, with no idea how the NBA worked or how wild his life was about to become. When he first joined the Pistons, he barely spoke to anyone and kept to himself so much that Isiah used to laugh and say he could not get even 2 words out of him once they stepped off the court. Rodman was quiet in a way that made people wonder what was going on in his head, but Isiah never pushed him away and instead treated him like a younger brother who needed someone steady around him. Rodman later admitted that Isiah pretty much saved his career, and he meant it in the most serious way. Back in the late 80s, he did not understand how fast his life was changing, and he made mistakes that could have ruined everything. When Rodman said those comments about Larry Bird in the 1987 playoffs, the whole league reacted fast, and he had no idea how much trouble he was in until Isiah stepped in and took most of the heat to protect him. Rodman said he didn't even know it at the time, but Isiah was shielding him from things he wasn't ready to handle, and that type of loyalty stuck with him for life. Isiah saw a tender, gentle soul behind all the defense and toughness, and he used to talk about how Rodman had never drunk alcohol or touched anything dangerous when he first arrived. He remembered how Rodman would sit quietly, barely making eye contact, and then go on the court and turn into this unstoppable force who chased every rebound like it was the most important thing in the world. Even with the bad boys' loud personalities, Rodman stayed in the background, watching everything, learning how to survive in a league filled with sharp elbows and big egos. But as Rodman became famous, as the hair color changed, as the cameras followed him everywhere, Isiah said it hurt to see him drift into a lifestyle that looked nothing like the quiet kid they welcomed years earlier. He talked about moments when he watched Rodman partying or struggling in public and wished he could pull him back. But they were no longer on the same team and no longer in the same orbit, and that distance made him feel helpless. The part that made Isiah emotional in the documentary was remembering those nights when he left his house to check on Rodman because he knew the young forward didn't know how to handle the pressure or the attention. Rodman always said he trusted Isiah because he felt safe around him, and he liked the way Isiah taught him how to carry himself without ever making him feel small. Even years later, when Detroit held reunions and Rodman showed up with tears in his eyes, the first person to walk over and hug him was Isiah, because that connection never faded, no matter how much chaos filled Rodman's life after he left Detroit. Number 5. Shaquille O'Neal. Dennis Rodman always talked about how strange and funny his bond with Shaquille O'Neal was, and the story between them didn't start with smiles at all. When Shaq came into the league in 1992, he was already treated like a superstar, the kind of guy everyone expected to dominate the whole sport. Rodman was already a champion with Detroit, already known as the guy who pushed, pulled, grabbed, annoyed, and defended like his life depended on it. So, when these two huge personalities met on the court, there was no chance it would ever be soft. Their early games felt like tests, almost like they were trying to see who would blink first. Shaq would try to bully his way into the paint, and Rodman would hang on him, bump him, and try to push him out of rhythm, and neither of them ever backed down. Things only grew louder once Rodman joined the Bulls. In the 1996 playoffs, Chicago faced Orlando, and that series felt like one long wrestling match between Rodman and Shaq. Rodman grabbed Shaq's jersey, tied up his legs, talked to him the whole game, and did everything he could to break his focus. And even though they didn't fight, you could feel how hot the tension was every single minute. Shaq didn't forget those moments, and for years both of them dropped little comments in interviews that showed their relationship was stuck somewhere between rivalry and annoyance. When Rodman talked about Shaq years later, he said something simple that showed how much things changed. He said, "We had our disputes along the years, but we got along pretty good." Coming from Rodman, that actually meant a lot, because he didn't fix many of his old relationships. But somehow, with Shaq, time softened everything. They kept running into each other at events after they retired, and little by little the anger faded into something warmer. Rodman even called him a good guy, and said Shaq was like a big kid trapped in a giant body, which was his way of showing respect without sounding soft. Shaq also spoke about Rodman, and even though he once called him his worst teammate, he didn't say it with hate. He said Rodman was a great player who just made life hard because he lived on his own rules. Shaq talked about how the team had to come an hour early, and Rodman would walk in 15 minutes before tip-off eating chicken and rice, jump in a cold shower during the coach's talk, then go out and grab 20 rebounds like nothing mattered. It annoyed Shaq at the time, but it also made him laugh years later, because he understood that Rodman's chaos was simply part of his genius. Rodman also once wrote about Shaq in his book and called himself a late bloomer. He said Shaq had fame since junior high, while he didn't even understand the game until college. He joked about how early fame gives guys more friends, more attention, and even women who suddenly act interested. And he hinted that Shaq learned the hard way that most of that love comes from money and hype, not from real feelings. Number 6. Joe Dumars. Dennis Rodman has always talked about Joe Dumars with a kind of steady respect that never faded. Rodman came out of a rough childhood and a small college, so stepping into a locker room full of strong personalities could have gone wrong fast. But Dumars treated him with calm, steady guidance instead of loud advice. Rodman has said many times that the Pistons felt like a real family, and he even joked in an interview with Rachel Nichols that he, Isiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, and Coach Chuck Daly were so close that they should have had sex, which was his wild way of saying the trust was deeper than basketball. It was Dumars who helped create that atmosphere for him, because he was the quiet star who didn't need attention to earn respect, and Rodman always understood that. Back then, Dumars was the reliable guard who defended like crazy, kept the team focused, and never let the bad boys' chaos pull him out of character. Rodman admired that. He said Dumars, Thomas, and Daly told him from day one that Detroit was a family and everyone had to stick together if they wanted to win. That stuck with him more than anything. Dumars was already known as a balanced, thoughtful player, and he didn't treat Rodman like someone who needed to be controlled. He treated him like someone who could be great if he stayed locked in. Years later, Dumars talked about what made Rodman special, and he said Dennis never missed an assignment and stayed locked in for 48 minutes, something even Rasheed Wallace struggled with. That meant something coming from Dumars, a guy who built championship teams as a player and later as an executive, and Rodman appreciated being seen for more than the noise around him. Their relationship wasn't built on dramatic moments or public displays. It grew through long practices, tough playoff runs, and a shared understanding that winning mattered more than attention. Rodman always said that he loved playing with Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, but his heart stayed in Detroit because of people like Dumars. Even when Rodman left the Pistons, the respect never cracked. Dumars once said Rodman had a different way of seeing the world, but he was always exactly where he needed to be on the court. And that was the kind of steady praise Rodman rarely got from anyone else. Want to see who else made Rodman's top list? Drop a comment, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more inside stories from the NBA world.